The photograph was a ghost, a shimmering collection of pixels captured from 637 meters by a Mossad long-range electro-optical observation system. Its primary lens, the diameter of a dinner plate. The image vibrated, a distortion caused not by any instability in the tripod, but by the thermals rising from the sun-baked asphalt of the Tunisian coastal road. In the Tel Aviv Command Center, a subterranean chamber known only as the Pit, buried 3 stories beneath the Kiryat military headquarters, the image dominated a wall-sized screen. The silence in the room was a physical pressure. It was the crushing, airless silence of absolute focus, broken only by the hum of servers and air filtration units. Danny, the grizzled, chain-smoking head of Mossad's Caesarea division, the agency's special operations branch, leaned forward in his ergonomic chair. The leather squeaked, a sound as sharp and intrusive as a rifle's bolt actioning in the sterile environment. He raised a single, unwavering finger, the nail clipped perfectly square, and tapped a specific coordinate on the touch-sensitive glass overlay of the screen. The image zoomed, pixels rearranging to magnify a small detail. A man, middle-aged and slightly paunchy, was exiting a beige Peugeot 505 sedan. A woman, his wife, and a teenage girl, his daughter, followed him out of the vehicle. But Danny's finger rested on the man's left hand. He was carrying a plastic grocery bag. Inside the translucent plastic, a long loaf of French bread, a baguette, was clearly visible. It was the bread that finalized the kill order. For the 3rd consecutive Tuesday, at almost the exact same time, 1942 local, the subject had stopped at the Patisserie Le Pacha on his way home from his office. Same car, same route, same bakery, same bread. It was no longer a routine. It had become a signature, a predictable human algorithm. This seemingly mundane detail was the final, irrefutable data point in an intelligence matrix that had consumed an estimated $60 million, involved human assets, HuMind, across a dozen countries, and leveraged signals intelligence, SIGINT, from satellites and listening posts across the Mediterranean basin. Danny pulled his finger back from the screen, his gaze shifting to the man who stood half-concealed in the shadows at the rear of the room. The man wore the uniform of an Israeli Defense Forces Major General, the stars on his shoulder boards catching the faint light from the monitors. His posture, however, was not that of a staff officer, but of a compressed spring, energy held in violent check. The man was Ehud Barak, the Deputy Chief of Staff. Danny didn't need to speak. The question hung in the air, a silent acknowledgement that the final burden of confirmation fell on the intelligence service. Danny gave a single, almost imperceptible dip of his chin. It was all the authorization Barak needed. The general turned without a word and raised a small, heavily encrypted Tadiran PRC 710 handset to his lips. His voice, when he spoke, was flat, devoid of emotion, a simple string of alphanumeric characters that constituted a prearranged activation code. Nei nitzanim yecholim lehizara. The seeds can be planted. Across 2,000 kilometers of open water, that 5-word transmission, compressed into a microsecond data burst and bounced off a military communication satellite, rippled through a hidden constellation of assets. On a rust-streaked container ship named the MV Starfish, flying a Panamanian flag of convenience and currently holding a position in a designated shipping lane south of Malta. A specialized antenna mounted inside a dummy smokestack decrypted the signal. Below deck, in a sealed, climate-controlled compartment that had been welded into the ship's superstructure, An Israeli Navy commander, a veteran of the elite Shayatet 13 flotilla, looked at a team of 28 men. Their faces were already smeared with black and green camouflage paint, their expressions grim and focused. They had been meticulously cleaning their weapons. Silenced mini Uzis, customized Colt M16A2 carbines, and Beretta 22 pistols for the fourth time that day. They stopped their work in unison and looked up. The sound of oiled metal clicking shut at the only response. The mission was active. In a quiet, sun-drenched suburb of Tunis, a man whose forged Lebanese passport identified him as Jean-Paul Curie, a commodities broker on a beach holiday, felt his modified Nokia 3210 vibrate. He was sitting in a rented Volkswagen Golf, monitoring a portable frequency scanner concealed in a picnic basket. The message he received was not text, but a single 7-digit number. The day's closing price of Daimler-Benz stock on the Frankfurt Exchange. It was the go code. He turned the key in the ignition. His specific task over the next 3 hours was to perform a final sweep of the local police and gendarmerie frequencies, confirming their patrol dispatch channels and identifying any emergency frequencies that would need to be jammed. He had 3 hours to accomplish this and position his vehicle for the first rendezvous. Deep beneath the waves, 60 nautical miles off the Tunisian coast near Sidi Bou Said, the commander of the INS Gal, a German-built Dolphin-class submarine running on silent electric motors, read the same decrypted message on a terminal in his cramped control room. The message had arrived via an extremely low-frequency ELF transmission, a painstaking process that required the sub to trail a long antenna wire close to the surface. He looked at his executive officer. Set Condition 1 for Special Operations. Proceed to final launch point. Coordinates Zulu 9 Echo. The clock had now started. Everything that would happen in the next 8 hours, the silent undersea launch of the combat swimmers, the rendezvous on a darkened beach, the coordinated multi-team assault on a guarded villa, the meticulously planned firefight, and the inevitable international political firestorm that would follow, was now an unstoppable cascade of events, all set in motion by the photograph of a man and his predictable loaf of bread. The target had a name whispered with fear and reverence throughout the intelligence communities of the world. But tonight, he was just Khalil al-Wazir, a creature of habit. And in this unforgiving world, habit was a terminal diagnosis. The file designation was Operation Show of Force, a deliberately sterile and misleading title for an undertaking of breathtaking complexity and existential risk. To comprehend its genesis is to understand the gravitational forces pulling on the key players, interlocking pieces on a geopolitical chessboard that stretched from the squalid refugee camps of the West Bank to the opulent, protected villas of North Africa. The first file, the nucleus of the entire operation, belonged to the target himself. Subject: Khalil al-Wazir, nom de guerre Abu Jihad, father of the struggle. Role: Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, head of the Fatah Western Sector, the operational wing responsible for attacks inside Israel. Past achievements: a master logistician and strategist, revered as the true military engine of the PLO. Following the organization's expulsion from Lebanon in 1982, it was Abu Jihad who rebuilt its shattered military capabilities. While Yasser Arafat was the charismatic political face, the diplomat in the Kefiyeh, Abu Jihad, was the hidden hand, the conductor of chaos. His fingerprints were on the 1975 Savoy Hotel attack in Tel Aviv, the 1978 coastal road massacre that left 38 Israeli civilians, including 13 children, dead. He was not a frontline combatant. He was an architect of terror, directing cells across Europe and the Middle East with chilling efficiency from his sanctuary in Tunis. Critical skill. His most potent and current threat was his ability to orchestrate, finance, and inspire the nascent popular uprising that the world was just beginning to call the First Intifada. From his comfortable villa, he funneled cash, disseminated instructions via coded radio broadcasts and couriers, and provided propaganda materials, even designs for more effective Molotov cocktails, to the streets of the West Bank and Gaza. He transformed sporadic stone throwing by frustrated youths into a sustained, strategic insurrection that was bleeding the Israeli military through 1,000 small, politically damaging cuts. To the PLO, he was a revolutionary hero, the prince of the uprising. To Israel's defense establishment, he was the primary accelerant of a fire they could not contain. The second player file belonged to the operations architect. Subject: Ehud Barak. Role: IDF Deputy Chief of Staff. Past achievements: a living legend within Israel's Special Forces community, Sayeret Matkal. Disguised as a woman in a brunette wig and a dress stuffed to create a female figure, he had personally led a Matkal team during the audacious 1973 raid in Beirut, Operation Spring of Youth, which eliminated 3 other high-level PLO leaders in their own apartments. He was a brilliant, obsessive planner, known for his relentless attention to detail and his pathological insistence on multiple, redundant contingency plans for every phase of an operation. Barak did not see war as an art. He saw it as a series of solvable physics problems. Critical skill. Barak's genius lay not in battlefield improvisation, but in meticulous, exhaustive preemption. He wargamed every conceivable point of failure, from a commando spraining an ankle on the landing beach to a sudden change in Mediterranean weather patterns affecting the Zodiac boats, to the precise political statement the foreign ministry would release in Washington. He demanded a plan so robust it could absorb unforeseen shocks without collapsing. For the Tunis operation, he had insisted on the construction of a full-scale, 1-to-1 replica of Abu Jihad's villa, codenamed Model B, in a secure desert training facility near Caesarea. There, the assault team practiced for weeks, running drills in daylight, at night, and blindfolded, until they could navigate its corridors and stairwells by muscle memory alone. They drilled scenarios for every eventuality: a locked interior door, the unexpected presence of a guest, a weapon malfunction. The third key player was the man tasked with executing this plan, the tip of the spear. Subject: Lieutenant Colonel Nahum Lev. Role: Ground Commander, Sayeret Matkal Assault Team. Past achievements: a veteran of countless covert operations, his service record was a classified litany of successful missions behind enemy lines. He was the man who, in 1972, had personally confronted and killed the lead hijacker during the storming of Sabina Flight 571. His face was unremarkable, his demeanor quiet, but his psychological profile was anything but. Critical skill. Lev possessed a state that his men referred to with awe as aggressive calm. In moments of extreme violence and chaos, biometric data from training exercises showed his heart rate would actually slow down. He processed information with chilling speed, making life-or-death tactical decisions in fractions of a second. He was not chosen for his brutality, but for his precision. He was not an assassin. He was a soldier, selected to execute a precise military objective under impossible conditions. His task was not merely to eliminate the target, but to guarantee the survival and successful extraction of every single man under his command from deep inside hostile territory. The chessboard upon which these men maneuvered was treacherous. By 1988, Tunis had become the de facto capital in exile of the PLO. After being driven from Jordan in 1970 and then Lebanon in 1982, Yasser Arafat had accepted the invitation of the Tunisian government to establish his headquarters there. It was considered a strategic safe haven, thousands of kilometers from Israel's borders. An Israeli Air Force strike in 1985, Operation Wooden Leg, had targeted the PLO headquarters complex, but an intelligence failure on the timing meant the bombs fell on empty buildings, missing the entire senior leadership, including Arafat and Abu Jihad. This failure only reinforced the PLO's sense of security and emboldened their operations. The Tunisians walked a diplomatic tightrope. They provided sanctuary but were desperate to avoid their country becoming a battlefield. Their domestic security services were competent, and their coastal radar and patrols, while not formidable, were active. A direct, overt military assault was a non-starter. It would trigger a war, invite universal condemnation, and shatter Israel's already strained relationship with Egypt. The geopolitical climate was a tinderbox. The first Intifada, which had erupted spontaneously in December 1987, had caught Israel completely by surprise. The daily international news cycle was filled with images of heavily armed Israeli soldiers confronting Palestinian teenagers armed with stones and slingshots. It was a public relations catastrophe. The Israeli government was under immense domestic pressure from a public demanding action. The perception was that the political leadership was paralyzed, while Abu Jihad directed the chaos with impunity from his seaside villa, giving interviews to international media, taunting Israel, and fanning the flames from a safe distance. This asymmetry was politically and militarily untenable. The final element, the spark that greenlit the operation's planning, was a specific, brutal act of terror. On March 7, 1988, 3 PLO militants, having infiltrated Israel from Egypt, hijacked a bus carrying civilian workers, many of them mothers, from the Negev Nuclear Research Center. The incident, which became known as the Mother's Bus hijacking, resulted in a bloody standoff. 3 Israeli civilians were killed before Commandos from the Yamam counterterrorism unit stormed the bus and killed the hijackers. The intelligence post-mortem was swift and conclusive. The order for the attack, the funding, the training, and the selection of the target had come directly from Abu Jihad's desk in Tunis. It was the final provocation. The Israeli War Cabinet met in a secret marathon session. The debate was not about the morality of targeted assassination, that line had been crossed long ago, but about its feasibility and potential consequences. A failed operation would be a strategic disaster. Captured Israeli soldiers paraded on television, a diplomatic firestorm that could sever ties with allies, and a monumental propaganda victory for the PLO. But doing nothing was perceived as an admission of weakness, a direct invitation for more attacks. The decision was made. The problem was handed to Ehud Barak. The directive was brutally simple: remove Abu Jihad from the equation. The constraints were absolute. Do it with total, plausible deniability, leave no Israeli footprint, and do not fail. The mission's genesis was a direct response to a cascade of failures. The failure to contain the Intifada, the failure of the 1985 airstrike, and the failure to protect civilians from attacks planned from afar. It was a high-stakes, desperate gamble to restore deterrence and fundamentally change the momentum of the conflict. The plan Barak's team devised was audacious to the point of madness. a symphony of deception and overwhelming force requiring the seamless, real-time integration of Mossad's intelligence gathering. The Navy's logistical reach, the Air Force's command and control capabilities, and Sayeret Matkal's lethal precision. It was an operation that, by any rational calculation, should have been impossible. The core of the operation began not with soldiers, but with whispers and shadows. Months before the scheduled assault, Mossad's Katsas, or field intelligence officers, began to filter into Tunisia. They arrived on different flights from different European capitals, Paris, Rome, Frankfurt, using expertly forged passports of various nationalities: Belgian, Irish, German, Lebanese. They were not commandos, they were chameleons, masters of blending in. One team, designated Team Lamed, the Hebrew letter L, posed as a group of wealthy Lebanese businessmen and tourists on an extended holiday. They rented 3 vehicles from different local agencies: a Volkswagen Golf, a Peugeot 305, and a white Fiat delivery van. Their objective was mundane in its execution, but critical in its importance: to drive every road, street, and alley within a 5-kilometer radius of the target's villa in the affluent Sidi Bou Said suburb. Over a period of 7 weeks, they methodically mapped traffic patterns, police patrol routes, the precise locations of checkpoints, and the average response times from the nearest gendarmerie station. They noted which streets had faulty lights, which intersections were blind, which roads were too narrow for a quick getaway. They became a familiar, non-threatening presence, their Lebanese Arabic and expensive clothes allowing them to move without suspicion. A second team, Team H, established a long-term safe house, renting an apartment with a direct line of sight to the main coastal road leading to the villa. Their cover was that of European real estate investors exploring coastal properties. From this vantage point, they employed long-range cameras and parabolic microphones to build a meticulous pattern-of-life profile for the entire neighborhood. They logged the baker's delivery times, Euro 5:30, the garbage collection schedule, Tuesdays and Fridays, 07 euros, the shift changes for the local police patrol car that was often parked nearby, 06 euro, 14 euro, 22 euro. Every detail was a potential asset to be exploited or a threat to be neutralized. The target's villa was a 2-story structure, surrounded by a 3-meter-high whitewashed wall, located just 150 meters from the public beach. It had a permanent guard post at the main gate, typically manned by 1 or 2 PLO bodyguards. Initial intelligence suggested Abu Jihad had a core team of 3 personal bodyguards and a driver, all armed with handguns and Kalashnikov rifles. The primary challenge was getting close enough for high-fidelity, 24/7 surveillance without alerting this layered security. This is where the technology became a central character in the drama. Mossad's technology division, Neviot, provided an elegant solution. An agent from Team He, an electronics specialist with a flawless French accent, posed as a technician from Tunisi Telecom investigating reports of line interference. Over 2 nights, he gained access to a telephone pole directly opposite the villa. He installed a device that looked exactly like a standard junction box. Inside this innocuous shell, however, was a pinhole camera with a powerful zoom lens aimed directly at the villa's front door and a passive acoustic sensor capable of capturing conversations within the front garden. The collected data was transmitted not continuously, but in compressed, encrypted microwave bursts every 15 minutes to a receiver hidden in the safe house. The problem was power. A battery would last only a few days, requiring another high-risk visit to the pole. The solution was ingenious. The agent wrapped a thin, undetectable induction coil around the main power line feeding the neighborhood, siphoning off just enough electricity to run the surveillance package indefinitely without creating a measurable power drain that might trigger an alert from the utility company. This data stream provided the crucial breakthrough. They could now see who came and went, log license plates of visitors, and, most importantly, begin to decipher Abu Jihad's personal routine. The audio was often muffled by wind and traffic, but it confirmed the number of guards on duty at any given time and their state of alertness. The plan in motion was a multi-pronged invasion hidden in plain sight. While the Mossad teams on the ground were the eyes and ears, the fist was being prepared at sea. 2 Sa'ar 4.5 class missile boats and the INS Gal submarine departed from Haifa Naval Base under the cover of darkness. Their journey was a calculated exercise in deception. They maintained absolute radio silence and sailed a circuitous route through the eastern Mediterranean, staying well within established international shipping lanes to appear as routine naval traffic on any long-range radar. On board was the 28-man Sayeret Matkal force, led by Nahum Lev, and a team of Shayatet 13 naval commandos who would operate the 5 Zodiac inflatable boats required for the beach landing. The command and control element was the most ambitious part of the entire operation. An old Boeing 707, refitted by the Israeli Air Force with an array of advanced systems, would serve as a flying headquarters. Codenamed Doomsday, it was packed with state-of-the-art communication arrays, electronic warfare suites capable of jamming regional radar, and a team of intelligence analysts. It would take off from a base in Israel and circle in a holding pattern over the central Mediterranean, high enough to be seen as routine commercial traffic on civilian radar, but close enough to maintain a direct, secure line of sight to the ground teams in Tunis and the naval force at sea. This flying command post, with Ehud Barak himself on board, would be the brain of the operation, receiving real-time video, audio, and positional data, allowing him to make critical go, no-go decisions from thousands of kilometers away. The problem this technology solved was the tyranny of distance. A ground operation so far from home was historically vulnerable to communication breakdown. The 707 was a floating, invulnerable comms tower that linked every disparate element of the mission into a single, cohesive weapon. The plan was for the ground teams to provide final, positive identification of the target's presence. The naval force would then launch the Commandos. The Mossad agents would meet them on the beach with the rented vehicles. One team would neutralize the external security, another would breach the villa, eliminate Abu Jihad, seize any intelligence documents, and withdraw. The entire operation, from feet on the beach to extraction, was allocated a maximum of 22 minutes. Then came the first setback, a human variable that threatened to unravel the entire clockwork plan. For 3 consecutive nights, Abu Jihad broke his routine. The intelligence model, built over months, indicated he was almost always home by 11 p.m. On the first night of the designated go window, he attended a late dinner with a visiting Libyan delegation and didn't return to the villa until 2:30 a.m. An assault at that hour was deemed too risky. The pre-dawn quiet of the neighborhood meant any noise, a breaking lock, a muffled shot, would be far more noticeable. And Tunisian police patrols were known to be more frequent and unpredictable after 2 a.m. Barak, aboard the 707, made the call to stand down. The mission was put on a 24-hour hold. The Commandos waited on their ships, a state of hyper-alertness that was mentally and physically corrosive. On the second night, he never came home at all. A cold wave of panic began to ripple through the pit in Tel Aviv. Had he been tipped off? Was there a leak? Was the entire operation compromised? Team He in Tunis was ordered to conduct a covert pulse check. The agent with the Lebanese cover drove his Peugeot 305 past the PLO's main Tunis headquarters. He saw Abu Jihad's car, the familiar beige 505, parked outside. He was working late into the night. It was a relief, but it meant another 24-hour delay. This created a new, dangerous problem: exposure. The Mossad teams were on borrowed time. Every extra day they spent in Tunis increased the chance of a random encounter, a curious neighbor, a routine police check escalating into a catastrophe. The rental car agreements were nearing their expiration dates. Their tourist visas had end dates. The longer they waited, the more their carefully constructed cover stories frayed at the edges. The technology, once a solution, now presented its own set of liabilities. The listening device on the telephone pole was a constant source of anxiety. What if a real municipal worker was dispatched to fix a genuine fault on that line? What if a minor storm damaged the pole and revealed the hidden hardware? Every passing hour stretched the tension thinner. Barak, circling in the 707, refused to be rushed. He trusted the intelligence model but understood that human behavior was the ultimate variable. He made a critical decision, relayed to the force commanders. The assault team would remain at sea, but the trigger condition was being altered. They would no longer wait for Abu Jihad to be home by a specific time. They would act the moment he entered the villa, and the pattern of life analysis showed the neighborhood was at its least active state, typically between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. This new flexible window increased the odds of a go-ahead, but also demanded more precise, real-time intelligence from the ground team. The second major complication was a direct threat to the operation's security. On the fourth day of the hold, the Mossad agent driving the Peugeot 305 was pulled over by a Tunisian police motorcycle patrol less than a kilometer from the safe house. It was flagged as a routine document check. For the agent, a man trained to handle extreme stress, this was a moment of pure, crystalline fear. His papers were forgeries, albeit of the highest quality produced by Mossad's labs. His spoken Arabic was fluent, but with the slight melodic Lebanese accent he had practiced for a year. The officer was young, polite, but thorough. He asked the agent where he was coming from, where he was going. He shined a flashlight into the back of the car, where a beach towel and a French paperback novel lay. Perfectly placed props for his tourist cover. In the trunk, sealed within a hidden compartment welded into the spare tire well, was a sophisticated jamming device designed to disrupt the police and military frequencies during the assault. If found, it was not just the end of the mission. It was an undeniable act of war. The agent maintained his cover, complaining good-naturedly in a mix of French and Arabic about being a tourist hassled by the police. He made a small joke about Tunisia and hospitality. The officer didn't smile. He took the forged driver's license back to his motorcycle to run the number. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Inside the safe house, the team was monitoring police radio. They heard the check being called in. They immediately prepared to activate their escape and evasion protocol, which involved thermite charges to destroy all electronics and an evacuation of the location within 3 minutes. Donnie in Tel Aviv and Barak in the 707 watched this unfold through a text-only, highly compressed data link. It was a moment of total helplessness. The solution came not from technology or force, but from shrewd human psychology. The Mossad agent remembered a critical detail from his cultural briefing. Tunisian police were notoriously underpaid and susceptible to small bribes. As the officer walked back to his car, The agent palmed a 50-dinar note, a significant sum. When the officer returned the license, saying everything was in order, the agent pressed the note into his hand with a conspiratorial smile. Pour un café, pour votre problème. For a coffee, for your trouble. The officer hesitated for a split second, his eyes flicking left and right, then the note vanished into his pocket. He gave a curt nod and waved him on. The crisis was averted, but the incident sent shockwaves through the operations command structure. The patrol officer's motorcycle license plate had been logged. Had he filed a report of the stop, even a routine one? Was the agent's face now in a local police database? They had to assume they were partially compromised. The team immediately swapped cars, moving the critical jamming equipment to the VW Golf. The agent who had been stopped was ordered into deep cover, confined to the safe house. His role in the beach pickup was reassigned to a teammate. The setback forced a cascade of adaptations, increasing the internal pressure. They were now operating with a reduced and reconfigured team, and with the chilling knowledge that local law enforcement had, however briefly, touched the edges of their network. The margin for error, already razor-thin, had just evaporated. The mission would either proceed in the next 48 hours, or it would be aborted entirely. On the night of April 15, 1988, the pieces finally, irrevocably, aligned. At 22:47 local time, the surveillance team logged Abu Jihad's Peugeot 505, pulling away from the PLO headquarters. The Mossad agent in the VW Golf, now serving as the mobile tracker, fell in behind the target's car, maintaining a safe, disciplined distance of 3 vehicles. He radioed coded, single-word updates. Package. On the move. Coastline. Taking the coastal route. At 23:13, Abu Jihad stopped at the Patisserie Le Pasha. The agent's voice was tight with adrenaline as he transmitted the key phrase over the encrypted channel. Signature confirmed. He is buying the bread. It was the final validation of the pattern. In the 707, Barak looked at the intelligence analysts who were monitoring every data feed. They confirmed all other parameters were green. Weather over the target area was clear, sea state was calm at 12 feet, and local police radio was filled with routine, mundane chatter. He keyed his microphone, his voice connecting to every element of the force simultaneously. Execute, execute, execute. At sea, the operation exploded into silent, furious motion. The rear bay doors of the SAR 4.5 missile boat swung open. 5 black Zodiacs, their specially muffled engines emitting a low, guttural thrum, slid into the dark water. The Sayeret, Matkal, and Shayatet, 13 Commandos, laden with weapons and over 30 kilograms of equipment each, moved with a practiced, brutal economy of motion that wasted not a single gesture. At 1:03 a.m., Abu Jihad's car pulled into the driveway of his villa. The tracker parked a street away and confirmed via a final burst transmission. The eagle is in the nest. That was the final trigger. The timeline was now absolute and unforgiving. 01:19 a.m., the Zodiacs hit the beach. There was no sound but the gentle lapping of the surf and the muted crunch of sand under combat boots. Waiting for them in the shadows of the dunes were 2 Mossad agents with the VW Golf and the Fiat delivery van, engines running. The Commandos melted off the beach and into the vehicles in under 30 seconds. The Zodiacs were scuttled, their engines and sensitive equipment dropped into the water by the Shayatet 13 swimmers, who would wait in the cold surf for the return trip. 01:27 a.m. The vehicles stopped 100 meters from the villa, engines cut. The team disembarked into the silent street. Nahum Lev split them into 4 units with hand signals. Team A, a 4-man unit including Lev, was the primary assault team for the villa interior. Team B was to handle the bodyguards and any external threats. Team C was the security perimeter and document seizure team. Team D, a 2-man sniper team armed with suppressed Remington 700 rifles, detached and moved to a pre-scouted position with a clear view of the villa's roof and upper windows. The agent in the Gulf activated his jamming equipment. A powerful wave of white noise instantly washed over the local police and gendarmerie frequencies. For the next critical minutes, the neighborhood was an electronic black hole. 01:29 a.m. Team B moved first. Ghosts in the darkness. 2 commandos, armed with silenced Beretta 22 pistols, approached the first bodyguard, who was dozing in the driver's seat of Abu Jihad's car. They moved on his blind side, 1 to each door. The doors were opened simultaneously. 2 soft metallic coughs from the pistols, and he slumped over the steering wheel. At the same instant, another commando slipped into the side garden and descended a small flight of stairs to a basement room where the gardener Zotgard was sleeping. He was neutralized with equal, silent efficiency. 01:30 a.m. Lev and Team A were at the front door. It was locked. Instead of using a loud explosive charge, 1 commando attached a specialized hydraulic tool to the lock mechanism. With a single, dull, metallic crack, the lock shattered. The door swung inward. They flowed into the dark house, weapons up, night vision goggles turning the world a ghostly green. The layout was an exact mirror of the desert replica. To the left, the staircase. Straight ahead, the living room. Lev held up a clenched fist. He could hear movement from the second floor. So 01:31 a.m. As they began to ascend the stairs, a 3rd bodyguard, Abu Jihad's personal driver and closest aide, appeared at the top of the landing, armed with an AK-47. He had been awakened by the sound of the lock breaking. He raised his weapon. Lev and the commando behind him fired their silenced mini Uzis simultaneously. The short, muffled bursts, sounding like a pneumatic nail gun, echoed in the confined space. The bodyguard fell backward without managing to fire a single shot. 01:32 a.m. The noise, though suppressed, was enough. A light flicked on in the master bedroom. Lev's team stormed the room, moving with explosive speed. They found Abu Jihad standing by his bed, reaching for a pistol on the nightstand. His wife, Intisar, stood beside him, frozen in shock. For a split second, there was a frozen tableau of predator and prey. Lev, as the designated lead shooter, stepped forward. He shouted in perfect Arabic, "Move away from him," to the wife. It was a strict rule of engagement. Avoid collateral casualties at all costs. Abu Jihad made his final decision. He lunged for the gun. Lev opened fire. The silenced Uzi coughed repeatedly. A controlled, disciplined burst into the target's chest. Abu Jihad staggered back against the wall. Lev kept firing, a brutal but necessary protocol to ensure a high-value target did not survive wounded, continuing to shoot long after he was down. He expended an entire 32-round magazine, an act of controlled, overwhelming violence designed to leave no doubt. 01:33 a.m. As Lev ceased fire, Intisar screamed. His teenage daughter, awakened by the commotion, ran into the room. A commando immediately grabbed her and her mother, shielding them with his own body and moving them into a corner of the room, ensuring they were unharmed. Their mission was specific. While this was happening, Team C was already at work. They went directly to Abu Jihad's study down the hall. They bypassed a simple combination lock on his safe, a model they had practiced on hundreds of times. and began removing stacks of documents, computer floppy disks, and audio cassette tapes. They methodically filled a duffel bag with the intelligence. 01:35 a.m. Lev's voice came over the team's internal radio, sharp, calm, and clear. Mevuda, confirmed. Yalla, yalla. Let's go. The entire interior operation had taken less than 5 minutes. The team collapsed back out of the house, moving with the same speed and discipline they had displayed on entry. So 1:38 a.m., the teams were back in the vehicles. The Mossad agents drove, not speeding, but moving briskly and deliberately toward the beach, melting back into the night. 01:45 a.m. They arrived at the extraction point. The Shayatet 13 Commandos emerged from the surf with new Zodiacs. The Sayeret Matkal team boarded. The Mossad agents did not. Their mission was far from over. They had to drive the vehicles to a separate, pre-planned location in an industrial district, wipe them clean of all forensic evidence, fingerprints, hair, fibers, and abandon them. Then they had to melt back into the city and exfiltrate one by one over the next 5 days on different commercial flights using different passports, their holiday now officially over. So 1:52 a.m. The Zodiacs cleared the coastline and rendezvoused with the INS Gal, which had surfaced just long enough for the recovery. The Commandos were brought aboard. The boats were filled with rocks and sunk. By 02:00 a.m., the entire assault force was submerged and heading at flank speed into international waters. Aboard the 707, Ehud Barak watched the final icon on his tactical map, representing the submarine, turn green and begin moving east. The jamming ceased. He allowed himself a single, sharp exhale of breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The operational phase was over. The consequences were just beginning. The immediate fallout was precisely what Israeli intelligence had predicted. At 02:08 a.m., Intisar al-Wazir, having freed herself, managed to call the local PLO office. The Tunisian police arrived minutes later to a scene of controlled carnage. The bodies of the 3 guards were discovered. Inside, the villa was a mess of shattered plaster, spent 9mm casings, and blood. Abu Jihad was dead. The news spread like wildfire. By dawn, Tunis was in an uproar. The Tunisian government vehemently condemned the attack as a brazen act of state-sponsored terrorism and an unforgivable violation of its national sovereignty. They publicly accused Mossad, an accusation Israel's government met with a wall of practiced official silence, neither confirming nor denying any involvement. The PLO declared Abu Jihad a martyr. Yasser Arafat, weeping on international television, swore biblical revenge. Funerals were held in Damascus, drawing massive, enraged crowds and thunderous cries for retribution. In the West Bank and Gaza, the Intifada exploded with renewed fury. The day of rage that followed Abu Jihad's death was one of the most violent of the entire uprising, with widespread riots and deadly clashes. On the surface, the strategic goal of quelling the Intifada by decapitating its leadership had backfired spectacularly, dousing the flames with gasoline. The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session, passing Resolution 611, which condemned the aggression perpetrated against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Tunisia, carefully avoiding explicitly naming Israel. The United States, Israel's key ally, joined in the condemnation. The diplomatic cost was severe. The extraction, however, was flawless. Every member of the assault team returned to Israel without a single injury. The Mossad agents on the ground successfully exfiltrated from Tunis over the following week, their covers intact. From a purely tactical and military perspective, Operation Show of Force was one of the most successful and audacious special operations in modern history. a long-range assassination executed with surgical precision, achieving all its objectives with zero casualties for the attacking force. For weeks, the world debated the mission. Was it a necessary act of counter-terrorism or a lawless extrajudicial execution? Did it make Israel safer? Or did it just create another martyr and escalate the endless cycle of violence? The answer, hidden from the public, from the UN, and from most Western intelligence analysts, lay in the duffel bag of documents recovered from Abu Jihad's safe. This was the final, critical revelation of the operation, the true objective that had been masked by the high-profile assassination. The assassination was not the primary goal, it was the cover story for an intelligence heist. The real prize was the data. The documents, disks, and tapes contained a treasure trove that Israeli intelligence would spend the next year methodically exploiting. They found the complete financial architecture of the PLO's Western sector. It detailed secret numbered accounts at the Banque Cantonale de Genève and in Luxembourg, a network of front companies in Europe used for money laundering, and illicit funding streams that were used to purchase weapons and finance terror cells. Within 6 months, Mossad, working with allied intelligence agencies, was able to freeze and disrupt over 70% of this financial network, effectively strangling the PLO's operational capacity abroad. The papers also contained detailed lists of PLO contacts, informants, and sympathetic agents inside various European and Middle Eastern governments. It was a complete organizational chart of Abu Jihad's clandestine network. This intelligence led to the quiet roll-up of dozens of sleeper cells and averted at least 3 major planned attacks, including a plot to bomb the El Al terminal at Rome's Fiumicino airport. Most critically, the documents provided a comprehensive blueprint of the command and control structure of the Intifada itself. The names of key organizers on the ground, the methods for disseminating instructions, and the clandestine routes for smuggling funds into the territories. While Abu Jihad's death provided a symbolic, short-term boost to the uprising's morale, the seizure of his intelligence allowed the Israeli Shin Bet to systematically dismantle the very network he had painstakingly created. They were able to identify and arrest key lieutenants, intercept communications, and cut off the flow of money that sustained the revolt. The Intifada did not end overnight, but its organizational coherence was shattered. It devolved from a centrally directed strategy back into a series of more sporadic, localized, and less effective protests. The assassination of Abu Jihad was a loud, dramatic, and bloody act of retribution. But the true legacy of the mission, the secret twist that recontextualized the entire event, was the silent, devastating intelligence victory it secured. It was a brutal reminder that in the world of espionage and covert warfare, the real battle is never just about the man you kill, but about the secrets he keeps. The gunshots in the Tunis villa were merely the sound of the lock being broken on the door to the PLO's most protected vault.